At my parents' anniversary dinner, my grandmother's voice sliced through the noise like glass breaking. "Riven, how do you like the house I bought you?" Every fork froze. I blinked, confused. What house? I live in a cramped apartment downtown. The silence that followed felt heavier than stone. My mother's smile cracked. My father's hands trembled. 40 people stared at their pale faces while the air in that elegant restaurant turned sharp enough to cut. That's when I realized a betrayal years in the making was about to surface in front of everyone. And what Grandma did next changed everything we thought we knew about family. I'm about to share something that still shakes me every time I think about it. But before I do, can you say hi in the comments or tell me where you're from? I love knowing how far my story can reach. It reminds me that none of us are truly alone. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. If my story touches something in you, if you've ever been betrayed by the people you trusted most, please subscribe to our channel. Your support helps voices like mine be heard. My name is Riven Locke, and this is how the truth finally came out. At that table, with 40 faces waiting for my answer, I felt the floor tilt under me, but the truth didn't start there. It started 12 years earlier in a living room in Tacoma, where the walls were crowded with smiling family photos and the air smelled like lemon cleaner. My parents sat me down at 18 and delivered what my mother called the independence talk. No college fund, no textbook money, no safety net. Just a handshake from my father and a line I can still hear. "You're smart, Riven. You'll figure it out." I did figure it out, which mostly meant stocking shelves at night, borrowing used editions with torn covers, learning to stretch a week of instant noodles into two, and keeping my mouth shut while my kid sister Lyra floated through high school in fresh sneakers and new phones like it was her birthright. The only person who broke that bleak rhythm was my grandmother, Eulalie Leah Quinn, in Santa Fe, who couldn't hear well enough for calls, so she texted in all caps and lots of commas, short bursts of oxygen in the middle of the grind, sending you 1-500 my heart study, don't quit. And then, like a small miracle, the deposit would appear, and I could buy the lab manual, a real bag of groceries, a full night's sleep. I graduated slower than most, worked faster than all, and by the time I turned 30, I was a junior auditor in South Lake Union with a permanent squint from spreadsheets, living in a Capitol Hill shoebox apartment, where the kitchen was so tight I had to angle the fridge door to miss the cabinet. The window looked straight into a brick wall, and the city buses stitched their diesel breath through the evenings like a lullaby I never asked for. Still, I had a plan. Save, 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 ferry. 35 minutes to Bainbridge Island on Saturdays to walk past starter homes I could almost touch, and imagine the weight of my own keys in my palm, not a landlord's notice. Not a lease renewal, but keys that meant nobody could shove me out. On my 30th birthday, my parents and Lyra swept in for exactly 30 minutes. My mother wrinkled her nose and said the place was a bit dim. My father commented on the questionable lighting. Lyra flopped on the couch, scrolling. They handed me gifts that felt like afterthoughts, and then my mother produced a crystal vase from Grandma, heavy, glittering, impractical as a tiara in a hurricane. And I said thank you, because manners are what you cling to when love is scarce. After they left, my friends, Noah, Serena, Matias, filled the room with pizza steam and warmth, and later when the last paper plate hit the trash, I sat in the silence of the brick-facing window and texted Grandma, "Thank you for the beautiful vase. I love it because she deserved gratitude, even if the gift made no sense for a life measured in square feet," and she replied in her jagged, earnest cadence, "So glad you like it, proud of you always." I went back to work, back to saving in increments so small they felt imaginary, back to watching Lyra post designer bags I could never afford, and restaurants I wouldn't choose even if I could, and the unfairness stopped being a sharp pain, and calcified into a dull pressure I carried like a second spine. Quiet. Because loud never changed anything in that house. Quiet, because survival is easier when you don't argue with the math. Still, some nights, the vase caught the city's weak light and threw it in fractured patterns across my wall. And I'd think about the distance between shiny and good, between what looks generous and what actually is. I'd think about keys and doors and voices that have to be written because they can't be heard, and I'd ask myself the question that would not let me go: if justice comes late, is it still justice? It was raining the way Seattle does at lunch, a fine gray insistence that slicked the sidewalks around South Lake Union. I was halfway through reconciling an expense report when my phone lit up with Declan's name, my cousin from Grandma's side in Santa Fe, and his voice came in hot. Riven, where were you at Lyra's housewarming? And I actually laughed because the words didn't compute. Housewarming for what, Declan? I didn't know she bought a house. He went quiet the way people do when they realize they've stepped into someone else's family fracture, then said carefully that everyone assumed I hadn't come because I was jealous and didn't like crowds. A story so polished it slid right off his tongue, and I felt it catch in my chest like a hook, not just the lie, but the ease of it. I hung up and called Lyra. She answered on the third ring with that breezy Seattle cool tone. I asked why I wasn't invited and where the money came from. She gave a soft scoff that sounded like a door shutting. Mom and Dad gave it to me, Riven, and it's none of your business. Then killed the call, and I had a fist around nothing, standing there with the drizzle streaking the window and an open spreadsheet blinking like a heartbeat. I pulled up her socials, scrolled past a crowd in curated linen clinking stemware in a Queen Anne bungalow, scrubbing through the carousel until a corner of a photo snagged my eye on a brochure fanned artfully across a marble island. A logo flashed a heron and a wren in a circle. The sleeved edge read just enough letters to trip my memory. Azure and Wren Realty, a name I had seen once in an email months ago, when Grandma asked me to tidy the formatting on a PDF because the font size made her eyes ache. Escrow instructions, initials EQ, the kind of document people don't send you unless they trust your hands. My stomach went cold in the chair because if Azure and Wren had handled Lyra's purchase, and I'd seen Azure and Wren on Grandma's escrow packet, then the neat story about parental generosity was missing a chapter. The money might not have been my parents' at all. It might have been Grandma's, earmarked for something else, maybe for me. Maybe not, but certainly not for a last-minute shrug toward the golden child. The comments under Lyra's post were a chorus of hearts. And so proud of you, babe. And I could feel the old script tightening. Riven the jealous one. Riven the quiet one. Riven who prefers to sit out, but under that script the floorboards in my head started to creak because accounts reconcile when you bother to follow the trail. I opened my personal email, dug like an auditor, with something to prove. Searched Azure, found the thread, and there it was. A subject line with a date 3 weeks before my birthday. Escrow transfer EQ, a cover note in Grandma's uppercase. Riven, can you check the spacing? I don't like when the lines run to the edge, and attached a preliminary title report with a field that made my breath stutter. Grantee, beneficiary, Riven Locke. I stared long enough for the drizzle to become a curtain. Then I took a screenshot of Lyra's photo with the logo and the dossier in my inbox and sent them to myself like I didn't trust the cloud, printed the report, and slid it into a manila folder because paper still feels like proof. And while the printer chewed, I checked Facebook and saw my mother's post beaming about a 35th anniversary dinner at the Charter Hotel downtown. All linen and skyline, and another guest list I was not on. The old pressure rose the dull second spine, but this time something else rose with it. A clean line of resolve that sounded like my grandmother's typed voice, loud and a little off-center. If they won't hear you, write it. If they won't see you, show them. I slipped the folder into my backpack, stepped into the rain, and told myself the next time I saw Grandma, I would ask her straight. Because if there's a house in this story, I need to know whose it is. The day before my parents' anniversary dinner, my phone rang while I was packing up my laptop at the office. My mother's voice came through, clipped polite, a tone she used when she was about to make something sound like logistics instead of rejection. Riven, about Saturday, we had to reduce the guest list. The restaurant charges by the seat and it's already full. You can come by the house another time to congratulate us. I waited for the joke that never came. So you don't want me there? I asked quietly. A beat of silence, a breath I could almost hear. It's not that, she said, it's just this event is more for family. Then she hung up, leaving the word family ringing in my ear like an insult. I stared at the empty screen, thinking how efficiently my parents could cut someone out of a photo without leaving a jagged edge. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. A message from Grandma Leah, in all caps, flying to Seattle for the celebration. Can't wait to hug you. I sat back in my chair. So she was coming. She thought I'd be there. For a few seconds, I imagined the dinner the way she pictured it, smiling faces, clinking glasses, the whole family together. Then I remembered the reduced guest list. Something twisted in me. I typed back, Can't wait to see you too, Grandma. I didn't tell her that I wasn't invited. I wasn't going to let my parents decide whether I saw her. On Saturday morning, I took the bus downtown, rain soaking the gray sidewalks of First Avenue. The smell of coffee and sea salt drifted up from the market. Grandma had texted she wanted to meet me at Pike Place before the dinner, cafe under the clock, easy to find. I spotted her immediately, a small figure wrapped in a silver-blue coat hair, perfectly set eyes alert behind thick glasses. When she saw me, her face lit up like sunrise. "Riven," she said far too loudly, waving her gloved hand. "Come here, darling." Heads turned, but I didn't care. I hadn't seen her in years. She grabbed my arm, pulled me close, and said, still at full volume, "Do you like your new house?" The words hit me like cold water. "What house?" I asked. "I live in my apartment, same as always." Her smile faltered. No, I mean the house I bought you, the one through Azure and Wren Realty. I finished the escrow right before your birthday. Didn't you get the keys?" I just stared. "Grandma, they didn't give me anything. Mom brought me a crystal vase and said it was from you." For a long moment, she said nothing. Her bright blue eyes darkened, and when she finally spoke, her voice dropped lower but stayed steady. "That vase was not from me. I wired $60,000 to the escrow account for a property in your name. Bainbridge Island. Remember, I wanted you to have roots." She reached into her handbag and pulled out a folded document, the paper already soft from handling. "Here. Preliminary title report. Grantee Riven Locke. It's part of the Quinlock Living Trust. I even signed it." See, her finger pointed to her initials, EQ, dated 3 weeks before my birthday. "The house was supposed to be your 30th gift. Your parents were only meant to hand you the keys." I looked at the paper, the legalese swimming in front of me. My throat closed. "They gave the house to Lyra," I said quietly. "She had a housewarming party. Everyone thought it was theirs to give." Grandma pressed her lips together until they were a thin white line. "Have they given you anything at all? Even mentioned it?" I shook my head. She stared past me at the crowded market stalls, at strangers buying flowers and cherries, as if trying to find one honest face in the noise. Then she said, almost to herself, "If they took what wasn't theirs, they'll explain it in front of everyone. I'll make sure of it." I tried to stop her. "Grandma, maybe we should talk privately first," but she cut me off with a small, fierce wave of her hand. "No, Riven. They like to do things in public. So will I. Tomorrow night at the dinner. I want everyone to hear the truth." Before we parted, she asked to see the photo of the vase. I showed it to her on my phone. She looked at it for a long time, then said flatly, "That's guilt pretending to be generosity." She slipped the photo of the title report back into her bag, zipped it with finality, and gave me one of her long looks that meant a decision had been made. "Keep your phone close," she said. "If they try to stop you, you call me." Later that evening, I stood in the elevator of the Charter Hotel, holding my reflection in the chrome door. I could see the folder sticking out of my jacket pocket, the printed title report, the emails, the vase photo, everything that shouldn't exist in a normal family. The elevator chimed, and I told myself if justice ever needed a loud voice, Grandma was born for that part. The banquet hall on the 15th floor glowed gold and white, the kind of place where everything shimmered just enough to make people behave. 40 guests sat at long tables lined with silverware that looked borrowed from a museum. I arrived halfway through the appetizers, slipped in before the toasts, heart pounding but face steady. When my parents saw me, the blood drained from my father's cheeks. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. She stood so quickly, her chair scraped the floor. "Riven," she hissed. "What are you doing here?" I smiled without warmth. "Grandma invited me." At the front table, Grandma Leah turned eyes, lighting up her silver dress, catching the chandelier glow. "Riven," she boomed, voice echoing off the walls. "Come sit by me." Every conversation in the room froze. Guests turned curious. My father forced a grin that looked painful. "Mother, let's not nonsense," she said, waving at the seat beside her. "I haven't seen my grandson properly in years." I walked the length of the room, every step landing like a hammer. Dinner resumed in uneasy fragments. Toasts were made about love, longevity, family. I tasted nothing. Grandma kept her hand on mine, a silent anchor. When the last toast ended and the clinking faded, she lifted her glass but didn't drink. Instead, she turned to me with that same public, fearless voice that could cut glass. "Riven, darling, how are you liking the house I gave you?" The room went still. Someone dropped a spoon. I felt my throat tighten. "What house, Grandma?" I said softly. "I don't know about any house. I'm still in my apartment." The silence that followed was the kind that swallows air. My father's hand froze around his wine glass. My mother looked down as if searching for something on her plate. Grandma's expression sharpened. "That's strange," she said. "I wired the money myself, signed every page. The house in Bainbridge Island was bought in your name." I pulled out my phone, tapped open the photo of the vase, and turned the screen toward her. "This is what Mom gave me on my birthday. She said it was from you." Grandma's eyes narrowed. Her tone dropped softer, but more dangerous. "That vase is not from me." A ripple of whispers spread around the tables. Then she turned her gaze on my parents. "Gareth, Marla, I gave you $60,000 to buy my grandson a home. I handled the realtor, the escrow, everything. You were supposed to deliver the keys on his birthday. So tell me, where did the money go?" My father tried to smile, but it came out brittle. "Mother, this isn't the time or place. It's exactly the time and place," she said. "You made it that way when you took something that wasn't yours." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We thought it would be better for Lyra. She's younger. She needed. Grandma's voice cracked like thunder. She needed what to learn that lying brings reward. Lyra shot up from her seat, cheeks red, mascara shining wet. "That house is mine. Mom and Dad said it was a gift for me. You can't take it away now." People were standing to see. Aunts, uncles, cousins whispering behind napkins. I could hear the click of a phone camera somewhere. My father's jaw trembled, words stuck behind shame. Grandma rose slowly, the room tilting around her authority. "Sit down, Lyra," she said. Lyra hesitated, then did. "The house was meant for Riven. It's in his name. I don't care what papers you hid, I signed them myself." Nobody breathed. The clatter of dishes stopped. The only sound was the faint hum of the ceiling lights. My father reached for my mother's hand like a man at sea. "Tomorrow," Grandma said, her voice steadier than anyone else's, "I'll speak to my lawyer. Tonight, everyone here will remember this as the night the truth stood taller than pretense." She turned to me, her grip firm, her words meant for everyone. "Don't let them make you feel small again, Riven. You've carried their silence long enough." I couldn't speak. I just nodded. The weight of 30 years pressed against my chest, but it felt lighter than ever. Around us, guests murmured pity and shock mixing in the air. My mother buried her face in her napkin. My father sat rigid. Lyra stared at the table as if willing it to disappear. As the servers cleared half-eaten desserts, Grandma stood again, gathering her shawl. "I think that's enough celebration," she said. The words rang final, sharp as glass. "From now on, we celebrate honesty." I followed her out of the banquet hall, the gold light fading behind us, and when the elevator doors closed, she exhaled slowly. "They've mistaken kindness for blindness," she said. "It's time they learned the difference." I didn't answer. I just looked at her reflection beside mine, both of us pale, both of us steady. For the first time in years, I wasn't the quiet one. I was the witness, and she was the voice that would finally make them listen. The rain had turned to a fine mist by the time we reached the pier. The lights from Pier 70 shimmered against the black water, the air thick with salt and diesel. Grandma and I sat inside her car facing the bay, the heater humming, the windshield streaked with silver lines of rain. Neither of us spoke at first. The night felt like it was holding its breath. Finally, she broke the silence. "Your father has been taking money from my account for years," she said quietly, her voice steady but raw. "Always small amounts. He'd say it was for Lyra's tuition for some emergency. I wanted to believe him. I stared at the dashboard lights, my chest tightening. "You mean he's been using your personal accounts?" She nodded, looking out the window. "Yes, I let it slide too many times. But this was different. I trusted them with your gift, and they took that too." She reached into her handbag, pulled out a plastic folder, and handed me a sheet of paper. It was a copy of a bank transfer, $60,000 wired from the EQ Quinn Trust to Azure and Wren Realty. The line at the bottom read clearly, "Beneficiary, Riven Locke." I traced the letters with my thumb, trying to process how far the deception had gone. She leaned back, her voice trembling but firm. I didn't think they'd dare use my gift for something else. But when I checked the escrow, the purchase matched exactly what I sent. Same amount, same date. The only difference was whose name they told the agent to hand the keys to. I asked the question I'd been afraid of. Do I even have any rights to it? She opened another folder and unfolded a single page of legal parchment. "You do," she said, tapping the header. "Trust transfer deed. Your name is printed right here. They can change locks but not titles. Not legally." I took the document from her and stared at my own name as if seeing it for the first time. Her eyes were red-rimmed but not from crying. "It isn't just the house, Riven," she went on. "I set up a small investment account for you years ago. They were supposed to manage it until you finished school. I found out they listed themselves as co-beneficiaries. Every quarter they withdrew the dividends as if it were their own." The rain drummed harder against the glass, a soft applause for every confession. I felt anger rising like a tide I couldn't control. "So they took not just the house, but 5 years of what you tried to save for me." She nodded once. "Every cent. And I let it happen because I kept believing they'd change." She reached for my hand, her skin cool but strong. "If they don't make it right, I will file a case against my own son. I won't die leaving this poison to you." I didn't know what to say. Outside, the ferries were ghost lights moving across Puget Sound. The city behind us glowed like a promise it couldn't keep. I thought about all those nights I'd eaten noodles counting coins while they siphoned comfort from my future. I wasn't sure which hurt more, the betrayal or the familiarity of it. When she spoke again, her tone softened. "This isn't just about money, Riven. It's about honesty. About whether we still know what that word means." We sat there for a long while, listening to the rain and the waves. Eventually, I drove her back to her hotel near Westlake. Before stepping out, she turned to me, her eyes reflecting the streetlights. "Tomorrow," she said, "you'll learn that truth doesn't come in one color." Then she closed the door, leaving the scent of lavender and rain behind her. I watched her disappear into the lobby, realizing that justice wasn't a single act. It was the slow reclaiming of every piece they'd tried to erase. Monday morning came gray and relentless. The clouds hung low over downtown as I walked into the glass building that housed Turner & Miles, LLP. The receptionist led us to a small conference room with a view of the waterfront, too calm for what was about to happen. Inside were my parents, Lyra, and 2 attorneys, one for Grandma, one for them. Grandma sat beside me, her silver cane resting against the table, her face composed in the way of people who've already seen every kind of disappointment. Mr. Turner, the family's longtime lawyer, began by clearing his throat. "We're here to discuss ownership and transfer matters concerning the Bainbridge property." He flipped open a folder, adjusted his glasses, and read aloud. "Deed indicates title under the name of Riven Locke, purchase funded entirely by the EQ Quinn Trust." The words landed heavy. My father shifted in his chair. My mother folded her hands so tightly her knuckles whitened. "It was a misunderstanding," my father said. "We thought Mother changed her mind and wanted to give it to Lyra. She said something about both grandchildren deserving security." Grandma's palm struck the table with a sharp crack. "I said both grandchildren deserve integrity, not stolen gifts." The sound echoed off the glass walls. "You had no right to alter my decision." The lawyer hesitated, then opened another folder. "There's something else," he said carefully. "The original will from 2018 left equal shares to both of your sons. But Mrs. Quinn updated it last year, 2024. This version moves most assets into separate trusts, one of which, called the Silverhouse Trust, is assigned solely to Riven." My father's face drained of color. "You changed the will without telling me I didn't need your permission," she replied. "You lost the right to ask when you started stealing from me." The room filled with the hum of the HVAC and the faint click of Lyra's bracelet as she fidgeted. Mr. Turner continued, "Records also show the property was reported under your tax filings. Mr. Locke as an investment holding for your daughter. That could raise questions about gift tax evasion. The silence that followed was brutal. My father rubbed his temples. We were trying to protect the family, he said weakly. By lying, Grandma asked. By teaching your daughter that deceit is protection, Lyra's voice cracked. You said it was clean. You said it was ours. Quiet, my father snapped, his mask finally slipping. I opened my bag and set a voice recorder on the table. I called Azure and Wren Realty, I said evenly. The agent confirmed Grandma signed everything herself and specified the buyer as Riven Locke. She still has the email chain if anyone needs proof. My father froze. My mother's eyes brimmed with tears. Lyra pressed her lips together, trembling. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Grandma took a deep breath and said the sentence that ended decades of denial. From this day forward, Gareth, you have no access to my accounts, no say in my estate, and no power over this family's future. He didn't argue. He just nodded once, hollow, as if the fight had been wrung out of him. My mother reached for his hand, but he pulled it away. Lyra's makeup streaked down her face. She looked suddenly very young, as if she had just realized the cost of being the favorite. I sat there watching all of it, feeling something unexpected, a stillness. Not triumph, not even anger. Just the slow release of something I'd carried too long. I thought about my college nights and her wire transfers, about the messages written in capital letters because she couldn't hear my voice but still wanted to listen. When it was over, Grandma stood leaning on her cane. Tomorrow we'll file to confirm the property under its rightful name, she said to the lawyer. Let's bring this into the sunlight. She turned to me. You'll come with me, always, I said. As we left, my parents stayed seated small against the wide windows, reflections lost in the rain. Outside, the drizzle had softened again, washing the city clean in its quiet way. For the first time, I wasn't walking away from family, I was walking toward the truth. The ferry ride to Bainbridge Island felt shorter than I remembered. The air was crisp, the sound of gulls cutting through the fog. Grandma and I arrived an hour before everyone else, the house standing quiet and silver against the sky like something waiting to be forgiven. It was the first time I had stepped inside since the court order confirmed my ownership. The floors still smelled of fresh pine and paint. The kitchen counters gleamed polished but unfamiliar. Grandma walked through the living room with her cane touching the wall lightly, as if greeting an old friend. This place needs truth to fill it, she said. Let it hear what really happened. We cleaned together, straightening chairs, wiping dust, arranging the crystal vase at the center of the dining table. I had brought it on purpose. It wasn't just glass anymore. It was evidence, a reminder of everything that had been twisted to look beautiful. When she saw it, Grandma smiled faintly. Let it sit there, she said. It deserves to hear the truth, too. By noon, my parents' car pulled up the driveway, followed by Lyra's. They stepped out slowly, looking as though they were walking into a courtroom instead of a reunion. I could feel their tension before a word was spoken. Grandma greeted them with the calm precision of someone who already knew how the day would end. Sit, she said, motioning to the long oak table. We'll eat first, then talk. There was no meal, only coffee and the kind of silence that presses on your chest. My father stared at the floor, my mother kept rearranging her napkin. Lyra avoided my eyes. After a while, Grandma placed her phone on the table and turned on the speaker. Mr. Turner's voice filled the room. The Superior Court has affirmed the revised trust. Property on Bainbridge Island legally and exclusively owned by Riven Locke under the EQ Quinn Trust. The confirmation echoed like a gavel. My mother's breath caught. Can we at least keep something for Lyra? She asked, her voice breaking. Grandma didn't flinch. No. But she'll have something else. She reached into her bag and drew out a sealed envelope. Lyra, she said you will receive the Leah Foundation Scholarship. It's not money handed to you, it's earned. 300 hours of volunteer work and 2 years of financial independence. Complete that, and you'll get your share. Lyra's tears fell before the words formed. You're punishing me. Grandma shook her head. I'm saving you. I want you to learn that worth is something you build, not something you inherit. My father finally spoke, voice hoarse. I made a mistake. I thought Riven was strong enough to handle himself. I thought Lyra needed more help. I looked at him across the table, every year of silence sitting between us. Not helping me was one thing, I said. Taking what wasn't yours, that's something else. He lowered his eyes, and for the first time I saw shame instead of denial. My mother began to cry quietly, hands covering her face. The room seemed to pulse with everything unsaid. Grandma broke the silence by pulling a small silver key from her pocket and handing it to me. "This is for you," she said. "It's the access code to the new trust account, the Silver Fund. You'll use it to keep this house alive." I turned the key in my palm, understanding what she was really giving me. Not just a house, but responsibility, a way to make something right out of everything that had gone wrong. Outside, the light shifted. Late afternoon sun poured through the glass windows, scattering against the crystal vase, splintering into hundreds of soft fragments that danced across the walls. Grandma squeezed my hand. "Justice doesn't need anyone to win," she said. "It only needs the guilty to understand." My mother looked at her through tears. "You're tearing us apart." "No," Grandma said gently. "You did that yourselves." When it was over, Lyra left the table first, her footsteps heavy on the wood. My father followed her outside, silent. My mother stayed a moment longer, staring at the vase, then whispered, "I'm sorry," before walking out. The air in the room lightened, but only slightly. Grandma stood slow but steady and looked around the house one last time. "Family," she said, "isn't made of blood. It's made of honesty." I nodded, watching the light on the walls fade into evening. I knew then that nothing about us would ever be the same again. 6 months later, spring had softened Bainbridge Island into something almost kind. The silver house gleamed after its fresh coat of paint, the garden out back reborn with rows of herbs and pale silver roses climbing along the fence. Every morning I opened the curtains and watched the sunlight slip across the floorboards like forgiveness slowly finding its way in. Grandma came every weekend carrying a tote bag full of soil and seeds. "We plant to remember," she would say. "Good things don't stay unless you keep tending them." We spent mornings in the garden, her hands trembling but sure, her laughter rising each time I teased her about bossing me around. I began to understand that she wasn't teaching me gardening, she was teaching me patience. Each small hole we dug was a reminder that rebuilding takes time, that growth is quiet but certain. One afternoon, as the light started to fade, she handed me a sealed envelope. "When I'm gone," she said, "you'll know what to do." Inside was a short letter written in her tidy script. "Don't hold this house too tightly. One day open its doors to others who've lost their own. Let it be a beginning, not a monument." I folded the letter back carefully, feeling its weight settle somewhere deeper than grief. The next week, Lyra showed up unannounced. She looked different, hair tied back, jeans smudged with dirt, a canvas bag slung over her shoulder instead of a designer purse. "I wanted to see the place," she said quietly. "I've been working at a youth shelter in Tacoma. I think I understand now." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked to the shed, pulled out an extra pair of gloves, and handed them to her. "You can start with the roses," I said. She smiled through her tears, and we worked in silence, the air filled with the scent of damp earth and new beginnings. For the first time, there was no hierarchy between us, no envy, no performance. Just two people trying to make something grow. Autumn came early that year. One Sunday morning, Grandma didn't wake up. She passed peacefully in her sleep, leaving behind a silence so complete it felt like the world had paused to honor her. The funeral was small, just family and a few close friends. In her final will, she left everything, the remaining funds, the investments, the Bainbridge property, to the Silver Foundation, a non-profit she had quietly registered months before. Its mission to give young people estranged from their families a place to live, study, and rebuild. She named me as its first director. The day I signed the papers, I felt both the loss and the gift of it all. Standing on the porch, I watched the tide rolling in, thinking of her voice saying, "Justice doesn't need a winner." She had been right. I hadn't won anything. I had simply learned to stop living like I'd already lost. Now mornings at the Silver House begin with sunlight cutting through the windows and the sound of the garden waking. The crystal vase sits on the porch table filled with fresh roses. When the light hits it just right, hundreds of tiny reflections scatter across the wall like pieces of something once broken now, whole again. I tell myself her words each day. Justice and love aren't enemies. They just need to stand in the same light. I used to think fairness meant getting back what was stolen, but it's more than that. It's the courage to live differently after the truth. The Silver House isn't just the home Grandma bought for me, it's the place where I learned how to plant trust again and how to build family from the ones who never walked away when I needed them most.